Welcome back to the boardroom. Take a seat, pretend you're listening. On the docket today, man, how phones have really become the new pacifier, and it's extremely disturbing and almost hard to watch in a way because you see it in public, you see them in their high chairs at restaurants and whatnot. But parents just don't parent anymore. I mean, in any traditional sense, they just hand their kid an iPad and let the algorithm raise them, which has drastic implications, some of which we'll outline, like the dark side of what your kid might be coming across. We'll get into that. I don't know if parents are just naive or they don't care, but it's actually kind of scary once you start to break it down, but back in the day, parents actually had to rock you to sleep, right? Sing you a lullaby or read a book. I used to love bedtime stories, dude. My dad's sitting at the edge of the bed, my brother on the other side, lights dim and everything. Just listening to a story, before you know it, you drift. I always had the issue I was too invested in the story that I couldn't fall asleep, you know what I mean? But now it's just like, here's Coco Melon and until your brain melts. That's what is that? That's not parenting, but too many parents, they think that a quiet child is success. Like you just won, you beat the game, but that's not parenting, not in the slightest. That is simply noise cancellation. That's it. Child's running around kicking and screaming. Here's a device. And you think you won. As long as the kid is quiet, you're winning, but that couldn't be further from the truth. You're actually replacing affection when you hand your child a device like that, because a phone isn't love, it's just a distraction. You're not nurturing the child or coddling them in any way. You're simply distracting them. But hey, it comes with free dopamine hits, especially at an age where they're not even conscious and their brain is very much a sponge and still developing and being molded. And yet here's all of this dopamine and fancy colors and what I'm saying, have fun. But at the end of the day, choosing to hand your child a device of any kind, we all heard the term iPad kids, but it goes the same with phones and everything. It's just the fast food of parenting, if you will. It's like McDonald's of childcare, right? It's quick, it's easy, and it's also guaranteed to ruin development, because the iPad babysitter, which is essentially what it is, parents, they don't hire babysitters anymore. Obviously, there's some nuance to that, but they just buy a tablet and call it a day. And they think that that is sufficient. That's fine. But what ends up happening is child development gets absolutely cooked. It gets destroyed. Attention spans, dude, forget about it. You expect a kid to sit through math class at school or English, when they've been raised on 3-second dopamine hits. Good luck. Good luck. That's why they have ADHD and over half of them are being prescribed meds, before they even get to high school. Dude, that's nuts. That's insane, because they're already kids who don't know any better. And then you put this screen, this algorithm that knows them better than they know themselves. They don't even know that they are themselves. They're not even conscious. And yet they're being raised by an algorithm. And it also means that there's no real world learning, because toddlers, all of us, we learn from touch, from feeling things, from falling down, from exploring the world around us, going outside, getting cuts and everything. People act like babies are so fragile, but it's actually the opposite. They are actually built to withstand a lot. They're supposed to be walking around barefoot in the grass and getting a mosquito bite and stuff like that. They're supposed to be exposed to the world. They're not as fragile as everybody thinks. That doesn't mean like throw them from the second story. That's not what I'm saying. But it's not like they're tiny little snowflakes, and they're supposed to be experiencing the world around them. Go get a splinter. You know what I mean? It's how you grow. That's how you learn. You don't learn that from swiping. You will never get that from swiping. It's like learning how to swim. and you just read a Michael Phelps biography, but you never actually get in the pool, big man, you're going to drown. Okay. You know what I mean? Like you have to get in the water. And it's the same with rearing a child. They have to get out there and explore. They're not going to learn anything from the screen, and honestly, it also stunts their emotional development as well, because instead of learning to self-soothe, they just get a screen jammed in their face the second that they fuss, right? So it becomes an expectation, right? And it transfers over into their behavior. They have no emotional regulation because every time they start to flip out, you just put a phone in front of them and then it solves the problem, right? And now you're starting to see even these young kids are in just zombie mode. Have you ever seen, we've all seen it by now, especially. Have you ever seen a toddler just locked in on a screen, just absolutely like 2 inches from their face, just completely locked in? Dude, they don't even blink. It's like, it's weird. You know what I mean? They're gone. It's like they're the Walking Dead, just preschool edition. And it's very disturbing. And speaking about disturbing, there is a dark side to kid-friendly content. And if you're a parent, I implore that you look into this, because it looks harmless on the surface, right? But there are Peppa Pig knockoffs and SpongeBob knockoffs, and it looks innocent enough, right? Bright colors, happy music and everything. It sounds familiar to the parent listening in the other room, and at a quick glance, that might check out. So you're like, oh, okay, go back to doing whatever you're doing, which is probably nothing, right? When you should be raising the child, but that's neither here nor there. What's so disturbing about these knockoffs is that sometimes it's some random nightmare fuel, for real, just slipped in by God knows who in some basement somewhere. And it sounds crazy because we all want to think, I don't know, highly of the world and the people around us, give people the benefit of the doubt. But there are people that exist and live amongst us sometimes with the most sinister of intentions. And they are actively creating child content that is disturbing, that is nightmare fuel, that is messing with the development of your child's brain. You understand? Like there are some wicked people out here, really sick individuals, and they are making kid-friendly content, so as a parent, it's your job to be aware of what your child is consuming, if they're going to consume at all. That we'll get into that, but there's the whole Elsa Gate problem. You know what I mean? YouTube already had this issue. Look it up, man. Creepy, violent, even bizarre stuff disguised as kid shows. It's out there. It still exists, and you need to make yourself aware of this and prevent your child from encountering this kind of thing. But you can also prevent it entirely by just not having an iPad raise your child. You know what I mean? And a lot of these parents, they just don't check. They're naive to it. As long as the kid isn't crying, they don't care what they're watching, as long as it's just doing its thing, and that's sad. That's so sad, man. That's how you get toddlers seeing things that they should never see, that they shouldn't know anything about, that they should not be ingesting, but it's just unregulated consumption of content, because the parent can't be bothered to parent. Well, then why'd you have the kid? You know what I mean? And, oh, well, I wasn't planning on it. Well, what are you going to do? It's here now. Be responsible. Yeah, I don't know what to tell you, And the bigger problem is really these parents are just outsourcing responsibility. And they know it, we know it, everybody knows it. It's just a cheap, quick fix. Why actually engage when you can just outsource parenting to an iPad? Why? And what that causes is you're actually raising addicts, because kids are not learning discipline, emotional regulation, like how strong you are, I mean, that kind of thing. They are learning addiction to algorithms, you know what I mean? And at the end of the day, you just raised the dopamine junkie. And so many parents think that, oh, just because he's 2 and can unlock my phone and go straight to YouTube and put on Coco Lemon, he's smart. He is smart. No. That is That is muscle memory. That's all that. He's not smart. He doesn't even know what he's doing. He just knows that these motions get him to what he wants to watch, which is a bunch of bright colors and dopamine. Do you understand? But parents all the time, they just brush this off as like, I'm raising a child genius. This is the next Elon Musk or Edison or Tesla. No, no, that's a dopamine addict. Today it's a phone, tomorrow it's a syringe. Like, you need to be careful, and it also just causes a family disconnect, because really you should be bonding with the child, not like helicopter parenting, but just with the child, but now you have the parents on their phone and then kids on their phone. I mean, it's insane that I see 6-year-olds with their own iPhone. That is absurd. When I was young and I used to have to walk my brother and I to school, I had a Net 10 phone. I'm sure some of you don't even know what the fuck that is. It's a little prepaid phone that was like this, and it had all the numbers on it, tiny little screen, and I had 3 numbers programmed into it. 1 being the police emergency services, 2 being my dad, and 3 being my grandfather. And that's it. Texting, yeah, right, dude. I'm like 6. You know what I mean? It was just for emergencies, and it was also to teach responsibility. If I could keep track of that, keep it charged, bring it to and from school, I would earn the next tier phone as I got older, and then I went to like a little flip phone and stuff like that. It was also a different time. Like, the iPhone wasn't out at this time, but now you have 6-year-olds, 7-year-olds, 8-year-olds with a later phone than what I have. And it's just insane, dude. And they're all in the same room at home, but they're all in different universes, all in their own curated online world. And it's just weird. It's so weird to see, and it's also just no accountability at the end of the day, because a babysitter, you can at least sue if something happens, they put hands on your child or something. But the algorithm, you're not touching the algorithm, dude. It'll just recommend some more trash. That's it. You hit don't recommend on one thing and it recommends 10 more. There's no beating that. You can at least find a decent babysitter, one that won't put an iPad in front of your kid, So what does this lead to? Well, iPad kids eventually just become iPad adults, just completely absorbed into the algorithm. That's how they were raised. That's all they know. And unfortunately, it's going to stunt their mental development, emotional development, and that seeps into their behavior and what they can comprehend and their intellectual capabilities and whatnot. I mean, you really have to think about the long term here. You're sacrificing your child's future for the short term of them being quiet. Dude, babies cry, man. It happens. It is what it is. We all cried. We all needed our diapers changed. Yeah, it just is what it is, man. But a phone as the new pacifier is not it. It's not it. And I hate to see it. I really do. Because I mean, I don't know, man. Don't be surprised when this generation hits 18 and they can't function without a screen shoved in their hand. Or worse yet, we get to some kind of like glasses that project a screen over the world that we see. Dude, we're headed for dark times, man. And honestly, it's already started with the iPad kids. But, like I said before, your phone isn't raising a genius. It's not. Your phone is raising an addict. Point blank, period. Childhood isn't supposed to be sponsored by YouTube Kids or Coco Melon, right? It's just, if parents don't wake up, and soon the next generation is going to be fluent in Peppa Pig, but completely illiterate in real life, So that's my 2 cents on the matter. I'm sure I'll get some hate because I don't even have a kid, but I promise you I wouldn't raise him like this. Anyway, man, hit that like button, drop a comment. Let me know what you think, if you agree, disagree, and why. Subscribe if you haven't already. I really do appreciate it. Thanks for sitting through another one. Meeting adjourned.